in mobile penetration testing, this is a whole new field. It's really going after the mobile devices in themselves, which stems from a topic really realistically called bring your own device. Now, IT people all across the world were screaming and yelling, security people specifically, were screaming and yelling about bring your own device. Because just when we got the network under control with the whole mobile and laptop and people wanting to take their stuff home, all of a sudden now we're introducing mobile platforms which had no control with them. And then people were bringing viruses and worms and taking data out of networks, and it just was a nightmare for security professionals everywhere. So let's take a closer look. All right, so this is the subject of mobile hacking. Some of the basic terminology that you need to be familiar with here is just ROMs in themselves. And this is the software in which the platform runs, okay? Next is the subject of breaking a system, okay? A lot of people are trying to do updates to their phone and they don't know what they're doing, so they install a non-platform specific update, and it messes with the ROM in itself and therefore becomes uncoverable. So they basically turn their mobile device literally into a brick because it's absolutely useless. Or bring your own device, right? This is the coming and going of mobile devices in the corporate workplace. All right. Some of the basic vulnerabilities that we have to deal with, or just app stores, right? We have our legitimate app stores, or I would say the default ones, but then there's also unconventional app stores in which you can connect to and get additional software and tools and tips and tricks and all sorts of fun stuff from unauthorized sources. Then mobile malware. If you look at the history of mobile malware since 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, you will see that there's an exponential growth with mobile malware. And I predicted in the 90s that once we got over this bandwidth issue with the mobile infrastructure, literally it was going to be a changing of the minds. Like all of a sudden we were going to be in the Jetsons world. And nowadays we pretty much are in that mode, right? Now we're in that 3G, 4G, very, very high bandwidth, and so that's changing the landscape of the way people do things mobilely, right? Before we only used to make, a phone call. That's it. That's all we did. Nowadays, we are doing everything: data analysis, hacking Wi-Fi networks, trying to run our businesses mobilely, syncing with all sorts of other devices, connecting with USB. So this mobile malware has now grown to be an exponential threat. Also, application sandboxing. In some cases, sandboxing is good because it restricts or quarantines certain code or applications, but in another sense, it's bad because if applications are supposed to communicate with other applications, well, they're stuck inside the sandbox. Okay. Also, the whole subject of encryption, this can be a weakness in itself if you're using bad encryption or no encryption. Okay, jailbreaking or rooting the device, right? So let's say company issues a device to someone and it's got some default settings and policies and things like that. Well, if the user can go ahead and jailbreak it or root it and get administrative access to it, they pretty much can do whatever they want and turn off all of those policies. So there's tons of different ways that you can jailbreak or root a phone. Depending on the platform, they all vary, and we're going to cover a handful of those. Or privacy and geolocation features. If you've ever installed an app and it said, hey, we'd like to connect to find out your locations and things like that, I personally find that completely annoying because, hey, what do you need to know where I'm eating lunch at? But basically, it's the tracking of us, where we're going. So from a privacy perspective, most people are voluntarily giving up their privacy just for the flexibility of using a mobile platform, and they're begging for it. Look at all of the lines when you have that new Android or new, Mac iOS phone that's coming out. People wait overnight in lines for that stuff just to get the latest and greatest. So it's very much an obsession. Also, physical vulnerabilities. If you can get physical access to someone's phone, bad stuff can happen, right? So everybody's familiar with the swipe logon or the pin pad. Well, that's great. You might not be showing someone your pin, but if you just look at the glare, you can see the oil from your hands, and you can see, well, the pin's 1, 2, 3, 4, and therefore get access to it. So there are physical vulnerabilities as well. All right. The major platforms that we're going to cover: Android, Mac, BlackBerry, and Windows. It's really just that simple. Now, from my experience, mobile hackers are realistically experts in one or maybe two of these flavors. I've been lucky enough personally to have a very, very strong Windows background, since the 90s. I've had pretty much every version of BlackBerry up until about 2005 when I stopped using them. I'll be truthful, I never touched the Macs. All right, because they say once you go Mac, you don't go back, so I can't do it. And then Android in itself, one of my favorite open source operating systems, because it doesn't have a lot of the restrictions that Mac or BlackBerry or Windows. It's just more of the open source route to things. But nonetheless, having an expertise in all four of these is extremely rare. Normally, you're just going to be an expert in like Mac or BlackBerry or Windows and Android or et cetera, et cetera. Normally, 2 out of the 4 is pretty common. Okay, but let's look at some of the attacks. All right, you can summarize the attacks by malware, data loss, data tampering, and exfiltration. So let's look at each of these a little bit more detail. You have traditional malicious software. Okay, this is going to be your viruses, your worms, your rootkits, except instead of targeting a computer in the classic sense, now we're just targeting a mobile computer over a wireless or 3G network. Okay, malicious applications. I personally, if you're my friend on Facebook and I get the Candy Crush request, you're getting deleted. I don't care if grandmom's sending the request, she's done. All right, I can't stand all of the, hey, connect to me, and play my game. Like, don't we have anything else better to do with our lives? But there's tons and tons of these applications out there, and everybody's got their favorite. Everything from Dungeons and Dragons to Candy Crush. And then, of course, operating system modifications. Certain applications need root access. So, hey, somebody wants to play the latest and greatest game of something, so, oh, sure enough, they're going to figure out how to get root access, and there's no shortage of tools in which we can root these phones nowadays. Then just the subject of data loss in itself, okay? So you have application vulnerabilities, which is just really a generic term, but anything that can yield to the exposure of data, I would consider an application vulnerability. If it's also disclosing information, well, then it results in data loss as well. Doesn't matter if it's an email or like SMTP or POP3 or IMAP. If it's in clear text, ultimately your data could be at a loss. Then you have physical access. If somebody gets physical access, well, these would include things like everything from lost and stolen devices to now somebody else has your phone and they're using it for whatever purpose. Then data tampering, or the attack on integrity. Again, application modifications. All right, one application now trying to change the features or parameters of another application. Especially in the subject of bring your own device, if you allow, as a corporate person, if you allow the home users to bring their own devices, how are you going to be able to control what security is either brought into your network or coming out of your network? So there's application modification as well. Right? Jailbreaking, another name for that is just rooting your phone. Or exfiltration is, removing, right? So extracting data streams, whether it be SMTP or HTTP or whatever it is, just finding a way to extract that data. Screen scraping, getting somebody's screen capture information or forcing their phone to actually screen capture for you, or turning on their webcam or something like that, or ultimately getting USB access. So mobile hacking in itself is really a new field that's been pioneered over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years. It's gotten really, really popular, and we're just now starting to get, a handful of the books and courses and subject matter. But a lot of people are not fluent with mobile devices, especially from this security perspective. I mean, grandmom doesn't care about security. She just wants to call her nephew and say happy birthday. She's not really concerned about all of this. There's plenty of people that they're a little bit more older in their mindset, they just want the cell phone to do to call somebody. They don't understand cell phones that only have 3 buttons on them. Where are the other however many buttons? They don't get it. Okay, so you kind of have like the old mindset versus the newer mindset. In the old mindset, people look at a phone and they think to themselves, I don't know what to make this thing do, right? Where the newer mindset, some of the younger kids that are realistically born with these Blackberries and Androids, they look at it completely different. They go, well, what can I make this do? And they're finding all sorts of creative things to actually make the cell phones, you know, do some really, really, really cool stuff. That's why the subject of mobile pen testing in itself has come leaps and bounds in the last couple of years, and I expect it to grow exponentially for the next several years. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples with a little bit more detail.